Welcome to Salute Your Sports Week 24. Common Ncaa, Drew Brackett, Tom Castleman. We got an exciting show. We're going to talk about the first weekend of March Madness. I'm back in my room. We got my lighting fixed. No more basement, no more echo. Got my headphones going. So home studio. Gotta love how we do things these days. Guys, before we get into this exciting show, just exciting times. This is some of the best times of the year in March. We'll also talk NBA and NFL as well later in the show. Next week we have our MLB preseason special. But guys, before we get into the specifics, what are your first impressions of March Madness? By the way, I think Tom's got 3 Final Four teams left. I've got 3 teams left. I think Drew has 2 left. So it should be pretty close. I'm currently winning our bracket, but it could still go any way. As Tom likes to say, I've got outs, is his words.
Yeah, well, in a year where everything's kind of been unexpected, we usually come into the March Madness bracket. Everybody has a nice, crisp and cleaned and fill out, and everybody says to themselves, everybody tells themselves that little lie of this is the one. And this year, more than any other year, we've seen a whole lot more upsets, a whole lot more surprises. Certainly, some were foreseeable. Others were definitely big shockers. And we'll get into a couple of those later on in the show. But I think that it's just been a really exciting start to the tournament. And I don't think there's a whole lot of people that have a lot of green so far in the bracket pools. There's a lot of red and a lot of crossouts.
Yeah, that Midwest region is really difficult. I mean, you have an 11 seed, a 2 seed, of course, but then you have a 12 seed and an 8 seed. So that Midwest region, a lot of red in folks' brackets.
And then, of course, we've also got the 15 seed Oral Roberts, only the second 15 seed ever to make the Sweet 16. Of course, the other was FGCU, Dunk City, Andy Enfield, their coach, still dancing for USC. They beat Kansas last night by 34 points. Hats off to the whole crew. We all had that upset. Maybe we're a little biased as Mizzou guys, but maybe we just saw that this Kansas team was not as good this year. You guys talk about a lot of X's. So this bracket, I don't know how well you can tell, but is supposedly one of the top 5 percentile in the country. And as Drew said, you look at this region, a lot of X's. I do like this bottom region, though. That one's going better. But
looks a lot cleaner, yeah.
A lot cleaner. Nonetheless, I don't think anyone has a good bracket. My bracket is just less bad than other people's brackets. But talking about the upsets, Drew said it on this show. Expect to see more upsets than usual. I feel like we say that every year, but this year it's really come true. I mean, you take a look at this Sweet 16. We've got a 15 seed. We've got 4 teams 11 seeded or lower. We got 2 11 seeds, a 15 seed, a 12 seed. We've got a 6. We've got a 7. We've got an 8. We've got all sorts of upsets, and we had the mighty Big 10 and Big 12. You know, everyone's talking about how good these conferences are, and we've got 1 Big 10 team and 1 Big 12 team left in the Sweet 16. And then you have the Pac-12 on the other side. Everyone dismissed the Pac-12. They just barely had a couple of teams fringe top 25 near the bottom there. No one in the top 15 to 20 in the country. Their highest seed was a 5 seed in this tournament. And we've got 4 Pac-12 teams in the Sweet 16, the most of any conference. All 5 teams that made the tournament from the Pac-12 all won their opening games. It's been crazy. Also, big teams like Duke, UNC, Kentucky, and Kansas, none of them are in the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1979. Can you guys guess who matched up in that national title game?
In 79?
Mm-hmm. Trivia.
1979.
Was that Valvano's team?
No, you're thinking
that was that Indiana State and Michigan State?
Very good, Drew Brackett. Nice. Ding, ding, ding. He wins the trivia. That was Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in the national title game. We also had DePaul, who was an independent at the time, and Penn, also as a mid-major, made that Final Four. So that was kind of a crazy Final Four. None of these Blue Bloods are in the Final Four. That's one of my impressions. The Big 12 and Big 10 not doing well, as I mentioned. The Pac-12 doing very well. A lot of people didn't see this. And Oregon State, a 12 seed, just barely won this, got in this tournament by winning the conference, and they're in the Sweet 16, and they've beaten a 4 and 5 seed by double digits. I mean, they're cleaning house. I will say this too. Maybe I'll toot my horn a little bit, but I think it comes as no surprise that Illinois is the first 1 seed out of this tournament. I didn't have them in my Final Four, unlike Mr. Castleman over there picking them in the championship. I think you look at Illinois, they had 6 losses entering the tournament. I know they finished strong, but this is a team that lost to our own Mizzou Tigers earlier this season. Look at Gonzaga, 0 losses. Baylor, 2 losses. Michigan, 4 losses. So Illinois had as many losses as the other 3 1 seeds combined. So it was just mind-blowing. People like Jay Billis thought that Illinois was a shoo-in for the Final Four when I really did think that this team was prone. They were vulnerable. But even I didn't expect Loyola to beat them that good. They led wire to wire the whole game. They won by 13 points, and that score was indicative of the game.
I like how you're so on board with Loyola when you picked them to win games for the entire tournament. And also a little bit of a misrepresentation on your thoughts on Illinois. You were over the moon with Oklahoma State, so let's not pretend like you thought that they were prone to an upset. You just love somebody a little bit more than that. That was certainly,
I don't know about that, Mr. Castleman.
That was certainly a bit of a surprising outcome in that game, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on in the show as we get into some of the biggest surprises, some of the best stories, and Cinderella talk later on. But the thing that really showed out, that stood out to me, is that coaching really, really matters a lot. We look at a team like Villanova. They're in the Sweet 16 despite being down. Their starting point guard, Colin Gillespie, and I think their second guard, I forget his name. Coaching matters. Where you have a team like that advancing.
Jim Boeheim
in Syracuse, exactly. That's a team where the 2-3 zone only works if the players are playing it actively. And through most of the season, Syracuse just wasn't seemed to being they weren't active in playing that zone defense. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they find that energy now that it's March. Buddy Boeheim, I think he's shooting at least 50% from 3 in each of the games.
27.5 points per game the first 2 games of the tournament. The coach is done absolutely lighting it up, and he's a guy that just rises up and shoots over the top. He's a tall guy. He came in averaging about 18 points per game, but he's been lighting it up this tournament. It seems like everything he throws up goes in.
Yeah, no, it's been incredible to see. I'm trying to think, Leonard Hamilton, he's in the Sweet 16 again. Like, good coaching has, really overcome a really uncertain tournament, and in some cases, some discrepancies in talent. Another thing, unfortunately, that has stood out is the impact of COVID on this tournament. I'd be remiss to say that, the Oregon Ducks and VCU Rams, unfortunately, that was a matchup that would have been fun to see that we didn't see because VCU had to bow out. We also saw Virginia getting upset by the Ohio Bobcats in round 1. Virginia, a team that was late to showing up in Indianapolis because they had to withdraw from the ACC and quarantine after they had a positive. And then Kansas as well. They struggled for a good bit against East Washington and the Grove brothers, who everybody they got their 15 minutes of fame, which was nice to see. But then got absolutely smacked around by the USC Trojans.
Brothers. By the Mobley brothers.
Yeah. So
the brothers were not kind to Kansas.
They were not. So that's unfortunately another thing that has stood out in this tournament is how the virus and how the situation has impacted some teams that who knows what would have happened, what would have been different if we were in a more regular year. I think we'd have a lot more clarity on a lot of teams because I think that the virus has played out in another way where we haven't seen a whole lot of non-conference. So, Calvin, you mentioned Big 12, Big 10, the 2 most represented conferences. I don't think that necessarily losing a single elimination game defines, who's better than whom. I don't honestly think that Oklahoma State is worse than Oregon State. But perhaps there's a little bit of difference in seeding and how much that matters, that we had these 2 conferences that were so propped up by the fact that they kept playing each other and played each other very well, that we didn't actually see a lot of cross-pollination, and that could have affected, certain teams maybe being better than we thought that they were, or being a little bit worse. So it's been fascinating across the board for this tournament, and just how wacky and weird it's different from previous years.
Real quickly, cross-pollination, that would be a word that Tom Castleman uses. That sounds like Castleman vocabulary. You won't hear that any other show, so tune in to Salute Your Sports for what vocab Tom Castleman will use this week. I think you can't read into it too much, but you have to read into it a little bit. The fact that, there were 9 Big Ten teams and only one is in the Sweet 16. That's your 1 seed, and then you have 7 Big 12 teams, again, only one in the Sweet 16. I think certainly you can't read all into it, but I think that's what made picking the upsets so hard this year, because I felt like we thought there were more upsets, but we weren't sure where to pick it. So as Tom said, in a smaller pool, go a little more conservative. I did get a few, though. I did have Oregon State, number 12 seed, over Tennessee. I had UCLA as an 11 seed, also winning Syracuse as an 11, but those are kind of more traditional blue blood teams. That's what made it interesting. You had maybe not Oregon State, but the other two teams that typically are better teams were seated lower in the tournament. I do think, though, you look at that USC-Kansas game, certainly USC was completely on fire and Kansas was completely cold, but that to me felt more like a 4-5 game where USC probably should have been a 4, Kansas, that had its worst shooting season since 1972, 1973 by field goal percentage, probably should have been a 5. So clearly, I think the Big 12 and Big 10 teams were a little overseeded, the Pac-12 a little underseeded. On a personal cool note, I love to see some of the former guys I did cover in high school shine. Austin Reeves out of Cedar Ridge, Arkansas. Guy was dropping 50 points in the Northeast Arkansas tournament. He lit up Gonzaga. He had like 27 points against them, covered him in high school. Also, as bad as Kansas played, one of the few bright spots was DeJuan Harris, had a career-high 13 points his first game in that tournament. Ironically enough, a kid out of Columbia, Missouri from Rockbridge High School was dominating for Kansas. He actually kind of saved them in that game, providing a spark off the bench. So, it's been good. Before we get into our revised Final Four, Drew, anything that really has stuck out to you?
Well, the first round, obviously the 1 seeds all looked really good and they all basically cruised. That's something that we don't see very often nowadays, where all 1 seeds are just dominating the 16 seeds. Usually there's a pretty close game, and usually it's like a 10-point game, but we didn't have that this year. Gonzaga controlled against Norfolk State. Michigan was in control the whole game. Illinois in control the whole game. Baylor in control the whole game. So you're like, okay, 1 seeds are looking good. And then, the next couple of days happened, and we had one lose. One got taken down to the wire. Baylor, looked good against Wisconsin, as did Gonzaga against Oklahoma. Michigan, LSU was a close game. So just interesting to see that, in a tournament of upsets, the 1 seeds dominated on the first round.
Well, I think what's interesting to see, typically we see these upsets the opening weekend, the Sweet 16. People can probably calm down a little bit. I think certainly Loyola as an 8 seed could make the Final Four because of how that bracket is. But typically the rest of the way, after the opening weekend, we see a lot of the 1 and 2 seeds take over. So if you're getting 2 upsets happy, look for a few less upsets here in the coming rounds. Speaking of that, though, we'll go to Tom Castleman. Tom, I think your original Final Four was Gonzaga, Baylor, Illinois, and Alabama, and you had Gonzaga taking down Illinois, I believe.
Correct.
What do you have? Obviously you can revise a couple of them that you missed. What would your sort of revised Final Four look like for you guys, and thoughts on some teams to look out for?
Yeah, as far as the revised Final Four, I don't see any reason to change the three regions that I have so far. Alabama looked really strong against Maryland, and again, a bit of a down year for the Big Ten in the tournament, but Maryland's a pretty solid team. I don't think Alabama's going to have too much issue with facing UCLA, and then they've got the winner of the Florida State and Michigan matchup to determine who's going to come out of the region. I think Alabama's more than capable of beating either of those teams. I think it would be a really good game. I think Baylor should pretty much cruise. I'm curious to see if Arkansas will provide a little bit of a speed bump, simply because Arkansas can match them in athleticism, can match them in pace, and can match them on defense. So I think that Arkansas doesn't have the offensive firepower, but I think, maybe on sheer volume, that could be an interesting one. But I still like Baylor out of that region. Gonzaga, just okay. And
so wait, Tom. So you've already penciled in Arkansas over Oral Roberts. You're not believing in the 15 seed.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Right.
I mean, good for them for getting this far, but part of the reasons that you see these bigger teams, we don't see as many upsets heading into the Sweet 16, is that now all the better teams have a week to prepare. However many days, it's a little bit shorter this year than in years prior, but they all have a week to prepare. They can scout,
Sure.
They can catch their legs. There's a reason, in addition to just sheer talent, they have a little bit more preparation as opposed to coming quick off of a turnaround between the round of 64 and 32. So those, and then I think out of that Midwest region, I'm going to go with Loyola. This was a team that I really liked all throughout the season. This is a team that I liked in the tournament, and then saw that they got that brutal matchup. I thought, I liked Illinois a lot. I liked Loyola a lot. It was brutal that they had to match up so early in the tournament. And if they were seeded a little bit differently, I would have liked Loyola a lot farther than I had them. And they came out and played pretty much the perfect game against Illinois and really showed how they are a superior team as far as tactician goes with Porter Moser. He's my favorite coach in college basketball, and more on him later. So I really like Loyola coming out of that Midwest region. I don't think that there are any Titans that can stand in their way for them to fall. So it's easy on seed to call Loyola, a Cinderella team making it to the Final Four, but certainly a very dangerous team, and one that the committee undervalued grossly, I think. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them on that last weekend.
So yeah, I tell you, the Final Four for me, I'm just going to get into it, comment before you go off on Porter Moser. But I think the most interesting region is the East region, where you have a Michigan team against Florida State. Juwan Howard, Leonard Hamilton, the coaches. That should be a dogfight. And then you have UCLA and Alabama. UCLA is red hot right now. You have Nate Oates against Mick Cronin, who's the coach for the Bruins. So that's going to be an interesting region. But yeah, the Gonzaga Bulldogs are rolling. Don't count out Oregon or USC, though. That's going to be a heck of a matchup. And then, Baylor's playing really well right now. You expect them to advance. Arkansas, they should beat Oral Roberts, as you mentioned, Tom. But if that does happen, Baylor and Arkansas is going to be a heck of a game, too. Obviously, Eric Musselman and Scott Drew, great coaches there. And then in the Midwest region, Syracuse and Houston. Houston's a good team, and Syracuse, well coached, a good team as well. I think the Cougars have a pretty good shot, but don't count out the Orange, as we've seen. And then Oregon State and Loyola Chicago. I think Loyola Chicago ultimately advances in that one. So the Elite Eight should be good as well, and that'll lead us to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think you put it well, Drew. I think there's a lot of some regions I think look pretty clear to me. I'm going to stick with Gonzaga. I've had them as a team to win it all year long. They're 28-0, 27 wins by double digits, including 25 straight wins by double digits. Baylor, the other top team all year long. Again, I have had these guys in my championship. Gonzaga, Baylor all year. I'm going to stick with Gonzaga beating Baylor. The Bears have won both of their tournament games by double digits. We've seen a lot of teams get upset. A lot of teams have close games, but Baylor and Gonzaga are simply not having any issues with that. I think Baylor had cooled off at the end of the Big 12 tournament from threes, and their last game they shot 47% from three. So against the good Wisconsin defense. So I think those two teams are the clear top teams in the country. I'm actually a little bit disappointed in Tom Castleman because he fell in love with Illinois. I think a few weeks ago he was on that same train as me, Baylor and Gonzaga, and it feels like he chickened out because he tried to get cute with the hot Illinois.
Well, there are a couple of things with that. One, we'd seen Baylor struggle towards the end of the season coming out of their COVID break, so that was one of those things where had they just kept rolling all along, I wasn't sure if they were going to be. I knew that they were Sweet 16 worthy easily, even if they're not at 100%. My concern was going later into the tournament if they were going to be able to defend and to shoot at the level that they had pre-COVID break. And certainly them losing to Oklahoma State in the Big 12 tournament didn't really help my opinion of them. I'm sorry?
Oh, I think it woke them up. I think they needed a bad game like
Perhaps,
that.
yeah. But, like, coming into the tournament, like, that was the thing where it's just like I thought that Illinois was a little less risky. And again, like that, they just didn't play well. They weren't coached well in that game. But Baylor's certainly showing that they are back where they were prior to their COVID layoff. And, fitting with that whole question that we had all season of, is it Gonzaga and Baylor, is it the field? We're back to it being that exact same question.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I simply thought Illinois was more vulnerable because they had 6 losses. Mm-hmm. Baylor only had 2. But anyways, I'm going Gonzaga and Baylor. My third team, I'm still going to go with Michigan as the 1 seed. I've got them in my Final Four. I went 3 1 seeds, and they're all alive. And honestly, Michigan has been the third best team most of the season. I think Illinois caught fire there at the end, and I think Isaiah Livers' injury just gets so overblown with Michigan. This team is so talented. They have so many scorers, which, by the way, he was their second leading scorer on the team. It's not like he led the team in points. He didn't lead the team in rebounds. He didn't lead the team in assists. I think that whole storyline is the most overblown story of this tournament. People saying that Michigan can't deliver without him. And this team has so much talent that you look at Eli Brooks and Brown. Those guys, Brooks and Brown, stepped up with 21 points each in their last win. These are the 5th and 6th leading scorers on the Michigan roster, both averaging under 10 points per game. So if your 5th and 6th leading scorers are capable of putting up 20 points a game in a big NCAA tournament game against an underseeded LSU team, I still don't know how Florida was a 7 seed despite having a worse record, and LSU was an 8 seed, had a better conference and overall record, had the NBA player there in Thomas, so I didn't get that seeding there. But I think Michigan is going to play with a chip on their shoulder. I think everyone in the country has labeled them as the most vulnerable 1 seed. I think a lot of people have had Alabama or Texas, which obviously didn't perform. A lot of people have Alabama and Texas in their bracket. Michigan was picked far less than Illinois, who's already out, despite having a better record in the same conference than Illinois. So I'm going to stick with Michigan. I felt good about them all year long. I think they're going to make it to the Final Four. Certainly, I think that's a very hard pick. I can see Florida State beating them. I can see Alabama beating them. That region is very wide open, as is the last region. That bottom right region there, you've got the 2 seed in Houston taking on the 11 seed in Syracuse. And Houston was dominant, 24-3 this season, deserving of that 2 seed. But Syracuse has that zone defense that's very hard to go against if you haven't seen them. Those teams in Syracuse's conference might have an easier time. I think I'm talking off the top of my head, but a few years back, Syracuse was a low seed. They upset Virginia. They made it to the Elite Eight or maybe even the Final Four as a lower seed. So it's been proven that that zone defense gives teams a lot of trouble. And you talked about head coaching. Jim Boeheim is one of the all-time greats and has sung 27.5 points in this tournament. That game could go either way. Loyola and Oregon State, again, could go either way. Loyola 24-4, way underseeded as an 8 seed. Everyone's been doubting them all year long. But then Oregon State, on the other hand, they won the Pac-12 tournament. They beat a 5 and 4 seed by double digits. They're arguably the hottest team in the country. So you might as well flip a coin between those 4 teams because I think each one of them is about equally likely to make it out. For the sake of making a pick, I am going to go the same way as Tom with Loyola. This is a team that made the Final Four in 2018, and they have a lot of the same key pieces. Porter Moser still the coach, and Cameron Krutwig, their star player, averaged double figures on that 2018 team. So I think he's going to help them, averaging about 15 points per game. Completely shredded Illinois, became a famous meme over the weekend. And this is a team that's hard to guard because they have 6 guys that average between 6.7 points per game and 8.8 points per game. So they've got Krutwig, who's a matchup problem, but then they've got who's their second guy. We don't know. Any other night it could be any guy, so it makes it very hard to prepare for them. And, of course, we have 101-year-old Sister Jean, vaccinated. She's showing up at the games. She's basically the team mascot and possibly some divine inspiration there for Loyola. So, I mean, how can you bet against Sister Jean? So I'm going to go with Gonzaga and Baylor, Michigan, and Loyola. 3 of the 4 I had originally, Loyola being the 4th. And I'm still thinking Gonzaga over Baylor in the championship. It would surprise me if that is not the result that we see.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're looking forward to some great games this weekend. It's the Sweet 16 followed by the Elite 8, going Saturday, Sunday for the Sweet 16, Monday and Tuesday for the Elite 8. A little bit different because of COVID this year, but definitely going to be a lot of fun to watch. We've kind of already touched on some of these things, but to your guys' opinions, what have been the biggest surprise of the tournament so far this year, and if that could coincide with what's the best story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely Oral Roberts, the 15 seed in the Sweet 16. They played a great game against Ohio State and, beat a very good Big Ten team. And they go up against the Florida Gators and win another close game. So Oral Roberts has just been on fire, the 15 seed out of the Summit, I believe. Yeah. So it's been a great story. It's been fun to watch, and just curious, can they keep it up against Arkansas is the question. I think a lot of people will be watching that game, and, can Arkansas make that push? Because if you let Oral Roberts hang around, anything can happen, as we've seen.
Yeah, a couple quick notes on Oral Roberts. Obviously, as you said, these guys are clutch. They deliver in the close games. They were a 4 seed entering the Summit League tournament, a 4 seed in the Summit League. They were just 13-10 on the season. They were battle-tested. They lost to our Mizzou Tigers. They also lost to Oklahoma State and a few other big teams. But still 13-10 as a 4 seed in conference. They win the Summit League semis by 2. They win the title game by 3. Then they beat Ohio State by 3 in overtime. Oftentimes the underdog loses the overtime scenario, but they push through, much like George Mason did against UConn so many years ago in the tournament. By the way, Kim English, former Mizzou Tiger, now the head coach of George Mason. A good side note there. And then they beat Florida, back to Oral Roberts, again by 3 points. So all these games are exciting. They all go down to the wire. But this is a team that was the 4 seed in their conference, sort of making Tom Castleman eat his words about the conference tournament championships and just how awesome they are and how we should never eliminate the automatic bids in those leagues for winning the conference tournament. And the thing about Oral Roberts, though, is they do have a chance against Arkansas because they've got a dynamic duo. Max Asmus is leading the nation with 24.5 points per game, and Kevin O'Banner at about 19 a game, but he's averaging 29 a game in this NCAA tournament. I don't know if you guys remember the show last week. I sort of hinted at an Oral Roberts upset over Ohio State.
The hint of the week.
I hinted. It was the hint of the week. It did happen. It also made me upset. I made a last-minute bracket change. I originally had Arkansas in the Elite 8, and at the 11th hour, literally about 11 a.m., 7 minutes before the tournament, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put Ohio State in. And that one didn't work out so well for me, the last-minute change there. But bracket still looks okay. Oral Roberts is probably the best story, but a few other really good stories. Personally, I'm a man of family. I love family connections, and I'm all aboard the Syracuse hype train. And Jim Boeheim and his son Buddy Boeheim averaging 27.5 points per game in this tournament. It's been really fun to watch him play. I think Loyola beating Illinois in a State of Illinois showdown was really cool to see Loyola pulling out that win. And again, Oregon State as a 12 seed this team wouldn't have been dancing if they didn't win the Pac-12 Conference Tournament Championship, and now they're also in the Sweet 16. So, I mean, a lot of exciting teams and a lot of good storylines.
Absolutely. For me, I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path, so to speak, in terms of, on the court. I'm going to say to be determined with the best story, because we still have a lot of threads a lot of stories that have not yet been written. We have, Gonzaga could be the first undefeated championship since '76 with Indiana. Mm-hmm. We could have Loyola making a deep run into the tournament. Maybe, they complete the true Cinderella story and capture their first title since 1963. That could certainly be something that's on the table. But for me, I'm going to combine biggest surprise and biggest and best story kind of into one thing here, where, how does the NCAA in 2021, where we have all these different social media applications and players are more empowered to speak out than they ever have before. The biggest surprise to me is, how can the NCAA expect to have two completely different situations in terms of amenities for the men's and the women's players, and not expect people to find out about it, not expect somebody to speak up about it? Sedona Prince is certainly been on the forefront of that with her TikTok videos, and other players have spoken out. So that's the most surprising thing that I've kind of gotten out of the tournament. I was completely unaware that there was such a disparity, and unfortunately, in hindsight, it makes sense. But I think that the best story is that the NCAA, was quick to react, even if it was, public shaming, even if it was, a lot of browbeating. They were quick to react and to remedy the situation. And it's also a great part of the story that the men's players and coaches stood up and said, hey, this isn't equal treatment. This isn't right. So I know it's a little bit different from what we like to talk about in terms of on and off the court, but I think it's been a fantastic story. Big surprise, awful surprise, but then a quick and happy ending for that.
Yeah, the NCAA women's tournament going on as well. A lot of chalk early on in the tournament. I looked at my women's bracket yesterday. Only like 3 upsets the whole tournament. It's crazy. They showed it that they had 3 double-digit upsets this year, and they only had 1 last year. So the women's tournament is much different than the men's tournament in that we see a lot of upsets. Certainly I'm not going with a big upset. I've got UConn winning it. I think both of you picked someone different, I think, in your women's bracket, if I remember.
South Carolina for me.
South Carolina. But anyways, let me ask you this, though. Back to sort of the men's tournament. Of these Cinderella teams, I know we've talked about, we're all aboard the Baylor Gonzaga train. I think we all like, I guess we like Loyola, but I like Michigan. Tom likes Alabama. That'll be a great game, by the way. And I'm not convinced that Michigan is going to get by Florida State. I do have it, but that could go either way. Tom, by the way, does have Florida State beating Michigan in his bracket. So that'll be really interesting. Could go a long way towards deciding who wins our bracket challenge. But of these Cinderella teams, who do we think is the most likely to make the Final Four, or dare I say, even win a national championship?
I'm going to stick with Loyola. I think they have the best chance because, quite frankly, they've shown it. They did it a couple years back in 2018, and they're doing it pretty much the same way that they did that time, with really good defense, players that are bought into and committed to the system that Porter Moser has put in place. A lot of the national people like to focus on Sister Jean, and I'm not out here nun hating. I don't want to get painted as a nun hater, but I think that actually takes away a little bit from the shine that the players deserve and that the coach deserves. Porter Moser is the type of coach who pretty much can write his check to anywhere he wants to. He could have back in 2018, but he's a Naperville native. He really likes being in Chicago in the Midwest. And if we look at that game that he coached against Illinois, how they basically had a great game plan for eliminating Ayo Dosunmu as being, the go-to player. They said, we'll let Kofi Coburn work in the post because you know what? He's not going to get 3 points, and we're going to get on all of Illinois shooters and blitz their ball handling. And then Illinois didn't really make much of a counter, but when they did, Loyola had an immediate counter for that they'd already practiced, had already prepared for. So for me, I'm all about coaching. I'm all about, Tom Izzo when he gets the Spartans going deep into the tournament. I'm all aboard the Porter Moser train as being my favorite coach in college basketball right now. And,
more than Leonard Hamilton.
More than Leonard Hamilton, yes.
Wow.
I like Porter Moser more than even Leonard Hamilton. Like I said earlier, Loyola to the Final Four, and it wouldn't be shocking if they beat Baylor or whoever they face to make it to the title game simply because the way that they play just seems to defy other teams' strengths. They seem to have a way of doing that, so it wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't, you'll put 100% certainty on that sort of thing, but
don't mortgage your house.
Would not mortgage the house, no. But
no.
Loyola, I think, is the team that has the best chance of being a Cinderella really, really deep into this tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's Loyola, and it's because they don't have to play a 1 seed the rest of the way if they continue winning until possibly the semifinal or the national championship. They already beat a 1 seed, and so, they just have to play either, if they beat Oregon State, they have to play an 11 seed or a 2 seed, so the odds are in their favor to make the Final Four as far as Cinderellas go.
Absolutely, and they're a winning team at 24 wins this season. Only Gonzaga had more wins this year than Loyola did. They won the conference in the regular season, the conference in the tournament. They're used to winning. I mentioned Cameron Krutwig, their star player, was on that 2018 team. They are well coached. I think it would be interesting to see Loyola and Syracuse in the next round, which I think I'm leaning towards. And it would be a great coaching matchup, Moser and Boeheim. That would be good to see. And what would be really funny is if my Final Four comes true with Loyola replacing Oklahoma State, you could have Gonzaga, Baylor, Loyola, and Michigan. And of those 4 teams, there's only 2 national championships between them, which is ironically, one of them is Loyola back in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. Michigan, I think, was 1989 that they won the tournament. Pre the Fab Four, pre Chris Webber calling a timeout that didn't exist. And Baylor and Gonzaga have never won a tournament before. So that would be quite a story, and that's like I said, that's what we've seen. And it's part of it is because of COVID. The star freshmen on UNC, Kansas, Duke, Kentucky, they didn't get adjusted well. That's why we had our Mizzou Tigers, our college, get off to a very hot start. It was an absolute fluke, as I knew it was, because I covered this team for 2 years. I knew consistency was a major issue with Mizzou. I knew shooting and offense were major issues. But they got off to the hot start because early in the season, all those seniors had already played together. So I think those senior-heavy teams, those well-coached teams, have been able to cope better with COVID. I struggle with this question, though, because I don't really consider Loyola a Cinderella to me just because they're not really that surprising. I know Tom got on me about not picking them the first round, but I went for an upset just because Florida or Georgia Tech won the ACC, and I figured that they're going to lose next round anyways. Let me go with something different. So, I think that game could have gone either way, but I think Loyola's proven a lot of people wrong, and they were in the Final Four very recently with some of the same personnel. And I think Syracuse and UCLA are 11 seeds, but man, I can't look at Syracuse and UCLA as a Cinderella team. So what team is most likely? I guess Oregon State is a Cinderella as a 12. I'd love to see Oral Roberts at least make the Elite Eight, beating Arkansas. That would be historic. And Arkansas is a very up-and-down team. You never know what team's going to show up. So it could happen, but there's a lot of interesting stuff to be said and to be determined. But I do want to ask you guys this question. Tom, would you like to see Porter Moser, and can he possibly develop Loyola? Can he be the next Mark Few at Gonzaga? Because Mark Few has been looked at for head coaching jobs. He's been at Gonzaga for 22 years. Another reason why I want Gonzaga to win, the only thing they're missing is the national championship. Can we have a similar thing in Loyola, sort of a mid-major powerhouse? Can they develop that way if the coach stays there And can they be a national title Final Four contender every year like Gonzaga? Because I think that'd be cool.
That would be really cool. I think the answer is, yes. I think he recruits really well. He finds players that, might not necessarily be, the most talented coming out of high school, but are certainly willing to buy into playing defense and the team brand of basketball that he likes to coach. It could go either way. It can go as far as, how much is Loyola willing to value him as far as basketball. Loyola's has never been really a big power school as far as that goes. So, are they willing to shell out some bigger bucks for him? He got a pay raise in 2018. Can he maybe get another one? I mean, it all depends on what he wants. If he wants to stay, the local product, basically have a job for life, because, with Loyola, when is Loyola ever going to fire him? He's going to be, are you kidding me? I'm Porter Moser. I got you to the Final Four.
Twice, possibly.
Twice, possibly. So I think that, if he wants to stay local and he's comfortable, working here, I could absolutely see that. I could also see him wanting to go to another conference where he doesn't have the pressure of having to win the conference tournament just to make the NCAA tournament. I believe it was last year, Loyola was not going to be in the field because they ended up not winning the Missouri Valley Conference championship game. Maybe he wants to get away from that pressure a little bit. If he goes to some place like, say, Indiana, which I believe has an opening now with Archie Miller gone, you can get multiple bids out of the Big Ten, as we saw this year. So it all depends on what he wants. It wouldn't surprise me either way. I know that's really, the coldest take one can have is either thing can happen. But it obviously just comes down to his family priorities and his professional aims.
Yeah, a couple of things real quickly on that subject. I saw a thing they were talking about during the Gonzaga broadcast. Mark Few said, if I'm happy, like, why risk it type situation. I also think Loyola is becoming such a brand name program that they may not have that issue where if they don't win the conference tournament, they don't get in the NCAA, because I think they're here to stay in the NCAA tournament. I do think what's interesting is, too, about Gonzaga, certainly Loyola is way behind them in that sort of brand recognition, but Gonzaga, for the longest time, Mark Few was getting some of those second-tier guys and getting the most out of them. But now all of a sudden, Jalen Suggs, his star freshman, is a top 10 national recruit. He chose Gonzaga over pretty much any school that he could have gone to. So now they've got that brand recognition. Also, Sabonis with the Indiana Pacers was an all-star this season. He came out of Gonzaga, so the coach could point to, I've got guys in the NBA, I've got top recruits. Now he might have a national championship. So I think Gonzaga is here to stay, and I think it would be cool to see Loyola also follow that brand. A lot of really good stuff to look for in the NCAA tournament. We're going to have plenty more on that next week as we get into the Final Four. So it's going to be fun. But more basketball talk, unless you guys have something else to add. In the NBA, there's been not as much fun recently, with a lot of superstars either having missed time recently or just recently going down. Thankfully, none of these are expected to be season-ending injuries, but we've got LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, even Giannis yesterday or the other day suffering an injury. So we'll get into what that means for the MVP race in a little bit. I'll have more on that in my statement of the week. But for me, guys, the question is the Los Angeles Lakers. At the moment, they're without LeBron because of that ankle sprain. They're without Anthony Davis. I've seen LeBron anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months, but they're thinking it should be at least a month. They've said indefinitely. Lakers are the 3 seed in the West right now, just 2.5 games out of being the 6 seed. So what would happen if the Lakers get a 4, a 5, a 6 seed? I mean, how low can they go and be in danger of not making the Western Conference Finals? Do we think they need a high seed to get there, or does it really not matter as long as LeBron and Davis are healthy come the playoffs? Because no bubble, there will be home court this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the NBA. It's a 7-game series. It's not about necessarily a matchup or, certain players getting hot. You have to prove it on multiple occasions. We're moving out of the one and done and into, the better talent wins out over an extended period of time. If LeBron James and Anthony Davis are back, and they don't have, anything more than like lingering ankle issues, if they're able to be full go, I think that the Lakers are still a really strong team no matter where they're seated. I think it does become tougher, not so much with home court, but just with the fact that they're going to have to go up against so many tough opponents. Instead of being at the top and facing, whoever wins the 7 and 8 play-in games, which I believe it's the 7 versus the 10 and the 8 versus the 9.
Correct.
Instead of playing one of those 4 teams that comes out of that, they're going to have to go up against, in a 4-5 matchup or a 3-6 matchup, which gets a little bit more dicey because we're seeing a lot of really strong teams in the West this year. I mean, the Nuggets and the Trailblazers are sitting right around that 5-6 spot. If the Lakers end up falling around there and they have to go to those home courts or they have to play those teams, both of those teams instead of, perhaps just one of those teams, that's where we're going to see a little bit of the matchups wear down on the Lakers, I think. So I don't think that they need to have home court advantage. I think it's more about the fact that they're going to be playing, an extra level of team, so to speak, than just grabbing whoever gets into those last couple of spots.
Would you take the Lakers or the field to make it to the finals in the West? Assuming LeBron and Davis are healthy.
Are healthy?
Throw that out there.
That's tough.
You know which way I'm going.
I know which way you're going for sure. Yeah, no, I have no doubt that you're staying strong on your position. Diamond hands, got a hold. I think I'd probably take the field at that point, just because not to disrespect the 7 and 8 seeded teams in the West, whoever they may be, but I think there's a pretty clear line between top 6 and everybody else. So if the Lakers have to face more of those, one of those teams instead of the 7-8. I think that might be enough to say I'll take the field over the Lakers.
How about you, Drew?
Yeah, it's interesting, with the whole COVID situation and, obviously the crowds aren't there. And so, what's it going to be like come playoff time? Are we going to have bigger crowds at these arenas? How will home court advantage be a thing? Because right now the Lakers are 14-9 at home and 14-6 on the road. So really doesn't matter as far as home court advantage. So I think, they'll make the playoffs. They don't want to slip low, being a 6 seed. But, yeah, I don't know if it matters this year for home court. They're a good team regardless, but you don't have 19, 20,000 fans screaming at you on your opposing team's court. So, I think the Lakers will probably still make it, but I don't think the seeding matters quite as much as previous years.
Do you like them coming out of the West still, assuming LeBron and Davis get back to healthy?
Yeah, I mean, if they're 100% healthy, absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're kind of on the same page. We saw the same deal in the NFL, not having crowds or limited crowds, sort of lessen that home field advantage type thing. And I think a lot of the true championship teams, I know Kansas City didn't quite win the championship this year, but Kansas City had a similar deal. They were actually better on the road away from Arrowhead Stadium compared to at home. So the Lakers have proven they can win on the road. As far as LeBron James winning a road game in the playoffs, just ask the 73-9 Golden State Warriors in 2016. He went in there and beat them twice in their home court, coming back from down 3-1 in that series to win the finals. So I think one of the years the Heat were like a 2 seed and they got to the finals and won it all too. So I'm not too worried about the seeding. I do think the home court matters less. Some teams are starting to let fans in. Some have limited fans, certainly not the full capacity. We could see that come the playoffs. Again, I don't know. I'm not going to guess too much. I think Tom brought up a great point. It's not so much the home court. It's a matter of what teams are you playing. But I feel this way anyways. If you're going to win a championship, you're going to have to beat the best teams. And there's no one in the Western Conference that scares me if I'm the Lakers. There's no one that's proven. The Clippers have never, ever, ever, ever made the NBA Finals. And just, having Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, that didn't do them much good last year. And they lost Montrezl Harrell off that team to the Lakers certainly doesn't help them. I think also taking a look at the Suns are a new team. They've got Chris Paul, but they haven't played together much. And I think the Jazz have overachieved a lot. They've kind of taken a step back in the second half a little bit. There's no one that scares me in that Western Conference. If LeBron and Davis are healthy, they're the team to beat, and it doesn't matter what seed they get. They could only make the series more competitive and more fun. So, I mean, these playoffs are going to be fun to watch, that's for sure. I love basketball. College, NBA, even high school hoops has its own charm. I mean, it's a great sport to watch, and it's a great time to keep an eye on it. And I think, if anything, almost having these injuries could almost give LeBron and Davis a little time off where they feel more rested come the playoffs. So in some way, this could become a blessing. I'm going to have more about injuries in the NBA in my statement of the week. But moving on, speaking of injuries, I kind of listed off a lot of these stars. Joel Embiid and LeBron James were two of the favorites for MVP. They're sidelined. Davis, Durant, Stephen Curry also was in that mix. So that leaves Nikola Jokic. He kind of looks like the MVP frontrunner. Same question as the previous one. Would you take Jokic or the field to an MVP? Jokic looking to become the first center since Shaquille O'Neal to win the MVP.
Yeah, I mean, Nikola Jokic is almost averaging a triple-double as a center. He's got 27 points and change, 11 rebounds and change, and 8.5 assists per game. It is unreal, the basketball IQ and the amount of touch that he has as a proverbial below-the-rim 7-footer. He is an anomaly. He is a player that is just completely out of this era in terms of what we all look for as the next best, basketball prospects here abroad. This also extends a little bit to Luka Doncic, where, their athleticism isn't necessarily in how high they can jump or how quick their foot speed is. It's a lot more in how they are able to perform and how they're able to play with having a body on them and being able to read that body so that they know exactly the best pass or the best shot to take for themselves. So I think I would take Nikola Jokic as the favorite. I think a player who needs to get, I think, a little bit more run in this conversation.
Let me guess. Damian Lillard from your team.
Lillard. Adopted MVP candidate for the season. I don't necessarily know how we define the term clutch. I like to think of it as, you are who you are in the hot moments. You don't wilt. You don't necessarily get better than what you are. But if we look at his time in clutch minutes, which is the final 5 minutes of a game with a point differential of 5 points or fewer, he's shooting 59% from the field, 49% from three-point range, 100% from the foul line. So he's getting it done on a team that is competing for that middle of the Western Conference playoff bracket without C.J. McCollum for much of the year, without Jusuf Nurkic for much of the year, a couple of their best players. So I think he definitely should be getting a little bit more run in the conversation. I think on pure volume, Nikola Jokic is just going to run away with this award now that we have, unfortunately, a lot more injuries. But, I still have a spot in my heart for Damian Lillard of Weber State.
Yeah.
I think you got to give it to Jokic, though. Because part of the game is not getting injured, right? I know there are freak injuries, and I know that injuries are accidents most of the time, but you got to give credit to someone who stay healthy throughout the season, and the guy's almost averaging, as you mentioned, a triple-double, and I know the Nuggets aren't in first place, but hey, they're a playoff team, and with everybody else getting injured, I think you just defaulted to Mr. Jokic.
Yeah, I think the Nuggets kind of creeping into that 5-6 seed. They're now 8 games over 500. I think does help his case a lot because a few weeks ago when we did our midseason award special, they were right at 500. They were right at that 8 seed. But now they've taken a step forward. We've seen Mizzou's Michael Porter Jr. is playing great the last month. We've also seen Murray get hot from 3. He's been playing well this season, but he wasn't playing as well as the playoffs. But now the last month, he's playing better. Jokic might be the leading candidate even if everybody was healthy. Obviously, you guys know that I think LeBron James is always the MVP. but if he does miss considerable time, that has to count against him. And Tom mentioned some of the stats. Jokic averaging 27 points, 11 rebounds, 8.5 assists, but he's shooting 57% from the field, 42.5 from three, 86.6% from the free throw line, and he is defying everything because he is literally one of the least athletic players in the National Basketball Association. And actually, I don't know if you guys watch NBA TV. I watch NBA TV, and they show, I think, the Nuggets broadcast in some games, and they kind of like make a big deal about it every time he dunks because he doesn't dunk very often. So it's just, they kind of make fun of him when he dunks. It's kind of funny. So I do think Damian Lillard has to be in the discussion. As Tom said, he's averaging about 30 points a game. But Jokic actually averages more assists than Lillard as a center compared to a shooting guard there. And I do think C.J. McCollum coming back is going to hurt Lillard's numbers a little bit. I think those 30 points, Lillard's not quite as efficient as Jokic was, and not having McCollum and Jokic there kind of lifted his stats up a little bit. McCollum did recently come back. He's looked good for the Blazers, so it kind of helps them as a team, but maybe hurts Lillard's chances a little bit. I think Doncic, who I think entered the season as the favorite, is certainly in the discussion. He's nearly averaging a triple-double as well. But the Mavericks are right around 500, so that'll hurt his case. I think James Harden has to be looked at as MVP. He's putting up also nearly a triple-double, and he's putting up some really efficient statistics since joining a net. But ultimately, I think Harden's won the award before. He still has Kyrie Irving there, Kevin Durant when he gets back. So it's kind of hard to even say he's the most valuable on his team, let alone the NBA. So I would say those guys are out. Giannis, it looks like his injury might be minor, but there's just no way that he's going to win this award 3 times. I mean, he's got to average like 40 points and 20 rebounds to win 3 in a row. So I think Jokic is going to be the MVP, and I think it's exciting to see because we've gotten so obsessed with the guards. Let's give the big men some love. And I think prior to his injury, Joel Embiid was probably the second leading MVP candidate behind him. So it is cool to see the big guys step out and shoot the 3 like those guys do. But still, it's also cool to see Jokic and Embiid get down there in the post. And it's kind of what I talked about last year on our show. Analytics, are important. We love the 3-point shot, but there is something. If you do something well, if you've got a big guy who can get you 2 points right near the basket, might as well throw it down there because a free 2 points is much easier than a potential 3 that could be missed. So I think I love that mix. My favorite is the mix of analytics, but also doing what you're good at, which is what Jokic excels at because he does shoot 3-pointers, but he doesn't get too 3-heavy to the point where he's efficient and also gets it done down low. So I think Jokic is going to win the MVP. I think it's going to be a historic season, and I think it's going to kind of give a little bit more love to the big men going forward in the years to come. But speaking of exciting news, big stuff, NFL free agency, contract Castleman, it's all off to an exciting start. Guys, what are some of the biggest moves, biggest things we've seen, winners and losers, whether that be players or teams? What's kind of stuck out in the NFL free agency so far? Because there's a lot of movement. A lot of things have happened.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the big thing that stands out is that Bill Belichick does not like missing the playoffs. He's gone out and spent money like nobody's business, getting multiple tight ends, defensive players, everybody across the board. Of course, it's not all going to run smoothly until they get the quarterback situation resolved. I think that Cam Newton is stopgap at best. I don't know what the path forward is for the New England Patriots long-term with their quarterback situation, if it's trying to, move up in the draft to make sure they get one of these, top 5 quarterbacks. I don't know what the direct path forward is. It wouldn't surprise me if that were it, and that Bill Belichick is just plugging as many holes as he can in free agency so that he can afford to spend that draft capital to move up. Actually, now that I'm saying that aloud, it makes more and more sense to me that that's the overarching plan for the New England Patriots. But until they get the quarterback situation solved, they can have a lot of nice players, but you really need the quarterback to go far. And then basically it's just there's a lot of veterans out on the market because with the coronavirus, with a limited attendance at best for NFL teams, the cap actually went down this year pretty significantly. So we've seen a lot of players lose out by getting cut by their teams. I think the Bears, I'm going to keep it short, are big losers for the decisions that they've been making. Signing Andy Dalton, I think, is a marginal upgrade at best at their quarterback situation, and it ended up costing them probably a top 5 cornerback in Kyle Fuller, a Pro Bowler, All Pro, really good, all around really good locker room guy as well. So that's disappointing. Have to count Kenny Galladay as a winner, getting a 4-year, $72 million deal from New York after coming off a season where he played in 5 or 6 games. So he's a big winner as well.
What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I think obviously Galladay's a winner, as Tom mentioned, a good deal there, and the Giants got some upgrades at the wide receiver position. But then you had A.J. Green going to the Arizona Cardinals, so I know he's not as good as he once was, but, alongside DeAndre Hopkins and I think Christian Kirk, if he's still there, you have some weapons. Yeah, and Larry Fitz, that's right. You have some weapons for Kyler Murray. But, yeah, the Patriots I don't know what day it was last week, but just felt like they signed everybody, and it was just the Patriots' day, and so they're just really reloading or I guess rebuilding, I guess, would be the better word to try and make them more competitive than they were last year. So they're also a big winner, and I think the Rams signed Deshaun Jackson to a 1-year deal, so they have that deep thread, and Matthew Stafford. Yeah, if he stays healthy, but Matt Stafford throwing the ball to him, that'll be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, you kind of hit it right on the head. You kind of transitioned for me. You love the transition. So thank you very much, Mr. Brackett, helping me out. I think Matthew Stafford is the big winner if we're talking individually during this free agent period. I guess he was a trade, so I don't know if that counts as free agency, but I'm just going to give it to Matthew Stafford because he went from arguably the worst franchise in the NFL, the Detroit Lions, just a horrific team, didn't get him enough weapons, didn't have a running game, didn't have a defense. He was asked to do all sorts of stuff. Now all of a sudden he's going to get to live in Los Angeles. The weather is going to be nicer. The city is going to be nicer. He's going to be playing for arguably the team in the league with the best defense. So all of a sudden he was asked, like it was all on his shoulders, go win us a game, Matt. All of a sudden he has a lot more margin for error. He's got a better coach there with McVay. I mean, McVay's over there smiling. He's like, I have to deal with Jared Goff. Now I get Matthew Stafford. Man, this is good. This is good. Better targets also with the Rams. So I think Stafford is the individual winner. Team winners, you guys hit on it. The Patriots getting Hunter Henry as a tight end. They added another tight end too. Nelson Aguilar, a receiver, the threat they needed. Kendrick Bourne, also another receiver. So they're getting the offensive targets they need. Jury's still out on Cam Newton. I don't think he's the long-term solution, but I think Cam Newton is still a lot better than the numbers showed last year because he didn't have anyone to throw to. I think that's what Tom Brady saw, the writing on the wall there. And the Patriots also got a lot of defensive players. They got a lot of offensive linemen, defensive linemen. They also had guys out because of COVID last season. They're going to come back. So, I mean, do you guys think they're a playoff team next year? Because I think they're probably going to make the playoffs next year.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I think they can do it. So I think the Patriots are big winners, but ironically, Tom Brady and the Bucks also are big winners, getting Brady signed to a 1-year extension. They restructured his deal to help the team more finance-friendly. Shaquille Barrett, a beast linebacker, they got him back. Rob Gronkowski is back at tight end. They franchise tagged Chris Godwin. I think that helps them. So the Buccaneers are definitely a contender again for the Super Bowl this next season. Tom, I'll be a little bit brief since you kind of covered it, but the Bears losing Kyle Fuller is a huge loss. The cornerback, you can make a case for it arguably being the most important position in the NFL these days because of how much the offense is passed, and you lose an all-pro cornerback, and they wanted him for less money. They tried to offer him less money. Where did that money go? Well, part of it was COVID. Part of it was Andy Dalton. So I don't know that upgrading from Dalton to Foles is really much better when you lose Kyle Fuller. They did franchise tag Allen Robinson, but still would have loved to see them get a deal for him there. They did get rid of Mitchell Trubisky, which was a plus, but still there's a lot of negatives there. Trubisky now going to be the backup to Josh Allen. That'll be fun to see. I think the Steelers, they got Juju Smith-Schuster back, Ben Roethlisberger coming back on a player or team-friendly deal. Look out for those guys. But I think there's a lot more to go, and I'm not going to get into too much of it. Maybe, Tom, you're talking about it later. The whole Deshaun Watson sex allegation scandal. I don't know what that could potentially mean for his free agency and even playing future. And I think we still have to see for sure what's going to happen with Russell Wilson. So we'll keep it tuned for plenty of more NFL free agency in the weeks to come. But I think now it's time for my favorite segment, Locks of the Week. Am I missing anything? We'll talk MLB preseason preview next week. It's crazy that baseball starts next week. Just mind-blowing. We barely talked that on the show. We'll get that in next week. Locks of the Week. Not a good week for Drew Brackett. He didn't go with the NCAA tournament. He was 0-3. The Lakers, right before LeBron's injury, winning big over the Timberwolves. He had the T-Wolves covering. Wizards, -3 over the Kings. The Kings won a close one. And he had the Flames straight up over the Oilers. The Oilers won 7-3. I was 1-2. I did very well with my bracket, but ironically, the picks that I gave for Locks of the Week did not do as well. UNC and Michigan State losing there. Oregon State, though, did get me that 12-5 upset. They did cover the 7.5. Tom Castleman missing on that UNC-Wisconsin pick, but he got Drake over Wichita State in the play-in game, and Ohio plus 7.5 versus Virginia there. So that was big for him. Drew and I are now tied for the top record on the show. And Tom, believe it or not, because we have a lot of ties, you're only 2 picks back of us. All of a sudden, a little bit of a hot run for Mr. Castleman. So
yeah, well, we'll certainly look to keep it going. The theme last week was NCAA March Madness. I'm only going to have one of those picks this week because we did that show right before the game, so we had some better information. But for me, I'll start out with a late NBA game tonight. Trailblazers are facing off against the Nets, and I'll take the Blazers -3.5 at home. Kevin Durant is out for the game with a hamstring injury. Kyrie Irving is away for the next couple of games on a personal issue. Landry Shamet, another guard for the Nets, is out. And James Harden, questionable to play with a neck injury. He's considered day-to-day on ESPN, questionable on the official injury report. So I'll go ahead and take the Blazers at home -3.5. I think that's kind of borderline as it is, but if Harden doesn't play, that's going to end up looking a lot better in my opinion. Let's see. I'm tempted to go with a player prop, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to. I mean, I do have one prepared.
Do it, Nike. Just do it. Peer pressure. Do it.
All right, we'll go to the 76ers and Golden State Warriors. Danny Green, his over-under for points is 9.5. No Joel Embiid, no Seth Curry for the 76ers. So Danny Green averages 9.1 points per game on the season, so getting an extra 0.4 points doesn't seem too difficult. And he's been over 10 points in 5 of his last 6 games. So we'll go with Danny Green, who is now going to get 9 points and nothing else from me for this evening. And then for the last game, guaranteed. Last game, I will go to the NCAA for this one. I really like how Alabama looked. I've been really impressed with how they've played in this tournament. So I expect them to look just as good against UCLA. Currently, it is at -6 for the Crimson Tide. So I think that they will show out over UCLA and run them out the gym.
Drew, do you dare go back to the English Premier League? Because you always get the English Premier League over-under. Last week you had no English Premier League picks. You had an offer. Are you going back to your favorite well where you seem to always get it right?
No, I don't want to, overtake the lead too much. So, I'm gonna try something a little different this week. We have the World Golf Championship, the WGC Dell Match Play, Dell Technologies Match Play at Austin Country Club. That starts on Wednesday. So we'll go Tommy Fleetwood versus Siwoo Kim. I'll take Tommy Fleetwood to win that match. It's at -125, so just a little bit of juice on that pick. Mark Leishman versus Victor Perez. Take Mark Leishman to win at -110. And then I will go soccer, but it's the World Cup qualifying Thursday afternoon. England versus San Marino. The over-under is 7 goals. Take the under in that contest. I think England wins 6-0.
I've got to go the over, just because San Marino is like the smallest country that competes in this. They're one of the worst countries. It makes me think back to when they lost 13-0 against Germany a few years ago. They're like a really bad team because they have like 35,000 people in the whole country. I don't know if you knew that about San Marino.
Well, I've heard they've gotten a little better since that Germany match. So I think that England puts up 5 or 6. I'm not sure San Marino scores. So it's going to be close, though. It may come down to the 90th minute.
I don't know what the rosters are looking like, but Harry Kane might be upset about Tottenham losing in the Europa League. So he may have himself score 3 or 4 goals to get the anger out, if he is, in fact, on that squad list, which I'm sure he is. Since it is World Cup qualifying, you would think you probably have your top striker in the country. But maybe because it's San Marino, maybe they're not playing him. Who knows? That could go either way. That should be a good one to track. I do think, what was your first pick, the golf pick?
Yeah, Tommy Fleetwood to win against Siwoo Kim.
You got to look out for Siwoo Kim. He's a good golfer. I keep my eyes on him. We'll see that one.
Do you actually know that, or are you just saying that?
No, he's good. I remember watching the major and seeing him perform well a couple years back. Is he South Korean, Drew? I think he's South Korean.
Yeah, he's South Korean. Tommy Fleetwood, the Englishman.
The Englishman. Okay. So I was going to go all NCAA, but since you guys aren't going all NCAA, I'm going to go ahead and stick one in tonight. I'm going to say the Sixers -4 at the Warriors. Looks like Stephen Curry won't be playing in that game. I know Joel Embiid's not playing, but I still think the Sixers cover the 4-point line. I've got 5 NCAA tournament picks written down, and I don't know where to go with these. So I'm going to give you a couple bonuses so you guys can really go out and win yourself some money this week. But as far as my official picks, I'll go with Baylor -6.5 over Villanova. Baylor is the second best team in the country. They've won the majority of their games by double digits this year. 47% from 3 last game. They're back on track. Should beat a banged-up, injured Villanova team, as Tom said, by 7 or more. No problem in that game. Then I'm going to go to, do I want to go all NCAA? You know what? Let's go with Michigan -3 over Florida State, just to disagree with Tom Castleman. He's got Florida State outright in that game. I'm going Michigan. This team continues to be disrespected. Third best team all year long. Isaiah Livers, blah, 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 blah. Livers is out. They can't do it. I talked about it earlier in the show. 2 role players stepped up with 21 points each in the last game. They have so many scorers, so much depth. It's very rare to see a 1-4 matchup where the 1 seed is only a 3-point favorite. So I like Michigan to win by 4 or more in that game. So I'm going Sixers -4 over the Warriors. Michigan -3 over Florida State. And Baylor -6.5 over Villanova. I'm going to give you 3 bonus picks. Those don't count in my record, but I had to just throw them out there so people could be happy with my picks. Syracuse +6 against Houston. Syracuse in that zone is tough for teams that haven't seen it. Buddy Boeheim, 27.5 points per game in the tournament. Jim Boeheim's a great coach. That Syracuse-Houston game could go either way, but +6, I like Syracuse with the points. Gonzaga -13.5 over Creighton. Zags are 28-0, 27 wins by double digits. 14 is just a few more than 10, so why not? And then finally, this one is more for fun since I want to cheer on Oral Roberts. So give me Oral Roberts +11. These guys have won like 7 games in a row. I think they can keep it within 11 points. For the record, though, the official picks, Sixers -4 over the Warriors, Michigan -3 over Florida State, and Baylor -6.5 over Villanova.
I like how Drew's going to make us pay attention to golf.
I'm excited.
I don't think I like that.
Love it. You better have that match on tomorrow, Castleman.
Do you have?
Oh, I will.
Do you know the NBC Sports Predictor App? Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
Not really, no.
So it's basically like Fox Bet Super 6. They offer free betting, and it's kind of like long shots. You got to predict X amount of things, and if you win like an X amount of prize, but almost never does someone win. It's free of charge. It's just for fun, and they have a lot of golf tournaments in there. So it made me think of that app because I play the golf like one-on-one type deal, which golfer will finish higher. And I did pretty good a couple weeks ago. I think you got to go 10 for 10 and pick the champion in order to actually win money. So I think I went like 8 for 10, which is not bad. I didn't have the champion. I think I picked Rory McIlroy to win. He didn't win. But I do think he won his match. So that makes me think of that, the golf head-to-head. Drew Brackett, of course, is the golf guy on our show. He enjoys the golf. But I do remember he had trouble with it when he picked the Women's PGA Tour matchup. He gave us very bad insider info.
Yeah, Lexi Thompson had a tough outing. But, you know, she'll be back. She'll recover. She'll be fine.
She had, like, Bryson DeChambeau's caddy or something, and Drew thought it was a difference. Didn't work so much. So take it with a grain of salt. Ironically, I'm, like, the big soccer fan, and I follow soccer very closely. But I think my soccer picks for locks of the week haven't gone as well as they should.
And when you only bet, 4 Barcelona and 4 Bayern Munich, it's not always going to work out for you.
It works out like half the time. But compared to the 80% that Drew gets at English Premier League, it makes me look bad. And he doesn't even know any of the players in the games he picks. He's like, I'm going to go to English Second Division Soccer League. I don't even know how to pronounce a team's name. Leicester City of the Premier League, it's Leicester City, and he still got it right. So,
of course.
And it's always the under. It's never the over. He always bets.
No. It's soccer. They don't score goals in soccer.
They do in the Bundesliga.
England will score some goals whenever they play. When did I say that was? Thursday afternoon. Yeah, they'll score some goals in that contest, but it's just 6.
My homeland, Bulgaria, I believe, is playing Switzerland, I think, in European qualifying, if I looked at the bracket.
Yeah, I mean, there probably won't be any goals in that game either, but I think that was like 2.5, so I wanted to go with some buffer on the over-under of 7.
Well, Bulgaria's defense does struggle. I don't know if you know that, and Jordan Shaqiri in Switzerland could be some trouble. I just love talking soccer. I just get excited. So.
Well, that's like a 1-0 contest, maybe 1-1 at best.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to Locks of the Week. I'm hoping to surpass Drew Brackett, get rid of this outright tie, and take the lead. I had the lead most of the season. I hit a cold stretch. Drew hit a hot stretch. You've had it for about the last 3 or 4 weeks. So I think this could be hopefully my time. We will find out. And Tom Castleman all of a sudden is doing much better. I wonder if he's getting insider advice from somewhere. I don't know where he's picking these picks.
Maybe Jenna's been helping.
I think, is your wife helping you? No? Okay. That's not a secret. We will figure it out. Moving on, though. Salutes, statements of the week. We'll start with Drew Brackett. We know it'll be short and sweet. He'll probably have one salute and a statement, and they'll both be very short and not very controversial.
Correct, or just one salute. And it's a hats off to, I guess, rest in peace, Elgin Baylor. He passed away earlier this week, one of the NBA's greatest players of all time. He was 11-time All-Star, 14 seasons with the Lakers from 1958 to 1971. So an old-school player who I didn't get to see play, but he averaged a double-double for his career. 27 points, 13.5 boards per game. He was one of just 4 players in NBA history to average at least 25 points and 10 rebounds over their career. But yeah, rest in peace to one of the greatest Lakers of all time, Elgin Baylor. And, I think he's known for, just being a superstar in that era.
What's crazy about the Lakers, if you look at the all-time greatest players, it is insane just how many Lakers you have. Because you look at a guy like Elgin Baylor, you talked about the accolades. Certainly I would have liked to see a higher field goal percentage from him, but he is undoubtedly one of the all-time great players, and he might not be top 5 Laker ever. I mean, you look at Magic.
Yeah, Magic. Shaq.
Kareem, Wilt, Shaq, Jerry West, the most underrated NBA player of all time. Are you kidding me? He's the logo, and then Kobe Bryant, of course.
James Worthy.
James Worthy's not as good as Elgin Baylor, though. Wilt Chamberlain, I don't know how much you count him as a Laker because
he was on it
he played in the latter part of his career as a Laker. And then obviously LeBron James, kind of the same deal, playing in his latter part of his career. It is crazy how many all-time great Lakers there truly have been over the years. Tom, what do you have?
I'm going to go with a little bit of an NCAA March Madness theme. It's a little bit late considering that we're now out of the first round and after the play-in games, but my statement of the week is that the NCAA should absolutely stop making the 16 seed a play-in game in 2 of the regions for the bracket. These are small schools that worked hard all season and won their conference tournaments to make it into the big dance. They should just outright be in the field of 64. We don't really need to have them as exhibition games, in part because guess what? I don't really watch those exhibition games. It's the team that's going to go up against a 1 seed, and except for one time in the NCAA's history, they're going to get beat down by the number 1 seed. So I think that the 16 seeded teams shouldn't have to have a play-in game. They should be seeded as they are. If you want to have additional play-in games, just make all 4 of the 11 seeds a play-in game to get into the tournament. Usually the teams that are kind of on the bubble are, highly qualified mid-majors that missed out on winning a single bid from their conference, and then, middling major teams that simply underachieved or haven't achieved enough to win an outright bid themselves. So make the 11 seed game a play-in like we saw with UCLA and Michigan State, Drake and Wichita State, both really, really enjoyable games to see. Add 2 more of those right before the tournament starts, a little bit of an appetizer to whet the palate for the tournament coming up. So I think that kind of solves the problem of teams like this year, Louisville or St. Louis or Colorado State, who's, had a little bit of a gripe for getting into the tournament. Just give a couple extra playing games to those teams instead of making teams that earned it, even though they're smaller schools. They should be in, and then give those opportunities to the major and mid-major teams at large.
Tom, first off, I completely agree. I don't know if I even like the playing games to begin with, but if we make them all 11 seeds, that would be fun to see. Side note, what is your favorite appetizer? I would like to know that question.
Oh, my favorite appetizer? Gosh, putting me on the spot there. I mean, like, if you want to count like bacon wrapped shrimp, if those are getting passed around as an hors d'oeuvre
Sure.
plate, I'll go for that. If you go for garlic bread, I don't know if that's considered an
I
appetizer
love garlic
or more of a
bread.
side, but
Garlic bread.
those are a couple of my
good.
go-tos.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess that's more of a side, isn't it?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on.
I guess all
how
these
it's
could be
used.
sides, though.
Right.
What about you, Drew?
I mean, I was thinking like a good dip of some sort, like an artichoke dip or spinach dip. But I mean, obviously, you got wings or what's the stuff?
Potato skins from the Heidelberg in Columbia, Missouri. Sign me
Sure.
up.
Mozzarella sticks, fried cheese. I mean,
Yeah,
easy to make, right?
Cheese. Even I make paninis with cheese. Yeah, cheese is great. I agree.
Yeah, I can't remember all the Heidelberg appetizers. Those were all good. You could probably remember more than me. I remember the potato skins. What else did we have there?
Marty's
wings.
Tell them about your wings. Tell them about your
Marty's
wings.
The dry rubs. The dry rubbed fried wing is fantastic there. And then you've got two options with the potato skins. You've got the cheddar and bacon ones, and then you've got the ones that have, I think it's mozzarella, green onion, and ham or something like that.
Which one
I was
better?
a late adopter to those. I enjoyed those more.
Okay, really?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure.
I think I got the ravioli a lot.
Ravioli?
Oh, yeah, I forgot they did that.
Fried ravioli, oh, yeah.
Buy one, get one free happy hour. Castleman takes his to-go bag and goes out about his life.
Just not after Mizzou football games, because, we wouldn't want to have people getting too much food from those.
How did we not have Tom in on this with us, Common? We went there quite a bit, if I recall correctly.
We went there. We've been there with Tom. We went there for Tom's birthday a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was 2015 when we all went back to college to celebrate his birthday weekend.
That's right. He got a White Russian, right?
Of course.
That's his go-to drink.
Yeah.
That's his go-to drink.
Better they make it than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Castleman
I don't remember the beer prices, though, at the Berg. I can't remember their special. It was probably like a $3 Bud Light or something.
It was pretty reasonable from what I recall.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But a lot of good food you can get at the Heidelberg. We will have to make a trip. Maybe I will at least make a trip this summer. Things are looking okay. I, of course, lived in Columbia, Missouri up until last summer, so that's always home for us. Unfortunately, the Mizzou Tigers letting down the fan base. I think Tom and I both had Mizzou losing, though, and I think Drew actually picked Mizzou winning in his bracket, which was surprising because usually Drew is the anti-Mizzou guy. The only time Drew went for Mizzou was the year that they were a 2-seed in the NCAA tournament. I think he picked them to win the whole thing, and then they lost in the first game.
I mean, that was just a brutal year. Besides the fact that I picked them, I mean, I was so excited. We were all so excited. I think it was junior year.
How about junior year?
Yeah, I remember, I was board hopping that game at KCOU, and it was a bummer just to hear that loss. They never went on a run, and Norfolk State got the win, and everybody was sad. I think we might have went to the Berg after that. But I just remember, it was 2 hours later, and we're watching ESPN or games, and all of a sudden Duke lost to Lehigh, so everybody started talking about that.
Yeah, two seeds going down. We've had 9 now in tournament history with Oral Roberts' win. Real quickly on that Mizzou memory, I had a broadcast 2-shift for class. I pitched the story idea that I would go talk to local restaurants about how much business is booming with the Mizzou Tigers. Everyone I talked to said they're going to win it all. This was for the 10 o'clock newscast. Lo and behold, I did all this work and Mizzou lost. So they changed my story to a sort of fan reaction to how sad everyone was. And I had girls crying in the bar. Oh, it was something else.
So you had to go reshoot?
Yeah, I had to reshoot.
Oh, wow.
I never got back to the station because, like a good journalist, I was going to get fan reactions to everyone.
And you were hanging out.
A Mizzou win, and I was hanging out watching the game. It was my excuse to do work and watch the game both. So I was waiting for fan reactions celebrating the win. Instead, I got tears and the heartbreak, which is Mizzou sports, by the way. I don't know if you guys follow the WNIT, the women's NIT. Mizzou blew a 17-point lead in their opening game, losing that one, a heartbreaker. I think it was Fresno State or something like that. So typical.
Which
Mizzou.
bar did you go to?
I went to several business establishments. I went to
business establishments. Okay.
No, I went to bars. It was Bengals and Big 12 that I went to.
Oh, okay.
But Big 12 is where I ended up doing all my stuff because everything that I used at Bengals was unusable. It didn't fit my story. So
That's incredible.
It was all basically Big 12, and it was really sad because, like, sometimes contacting bars for a story can be hard. And the Bengals, like, owner of the Bengals Bar and Grill, which is now closed, unfortunately, she was the nicest lady ever. She was so nice. And I was going to put her on TV, and it just didn't happen. But
is the Big 12 still there, or is it now the SEC? Just curious.
No, it's called the Campus.
Well done.
Oh, okay.
But I call it Big 12. So
that's well done, Castleman. It went over his head.
He's got the corny jokes. That's Mr. Castleman for you. Anyways.
You didn't pick up on it, though.
I'm not as clever as Castleman, okay? You know this.
Okay.
You know this. Tom Castleman is the resident smart guy in our show.
At least smart Alec.
That makes sense.
Smart Alec, yeah. I know I got a better ACT score than Drew, but we won't get into that.
Oh, my God. I don't even remember my own ACT score.
Who knows?
We're not going to get into the thing that I just mentioned out of left field for no reason.
We're not going to get into it. But back to sports. My statement of the week, the NBA rushed back too soon to start the season. It's led to a lot of injuries. We talked about it, LeBron, Curry, KD, Davis, Giannis, a lot of these guys going down. Some of it is more of a coincidence, but I think some of it is rushing guys back. I mean, you look at LeBron and Davis themselves, they played deeper in the season than anyone else. Jimmy Butler was also out earlier this season, a guy that also played in the NBA Finals. I know they did it to grab the money right away type deal because the salary, as Contract Castleman will tell you, they lost money due to COVID. But I think losing a little bit of money is worth your league's brand, and I think it could pay off in the long term to have your stars playing and to possibly get more fans in the stands. If they waited to push back even longer, they could have had more fans in the stands, and they could have done it where they gradually phased it into its normal season in 3 to 4 years. Maybe each year start a week earlier, a week later type thing until you get back to that October schedule. So I think it's very hard for the league to have so many of its superstars down right now, and that's where you lose a lot of casual fans like Drew Brackett, people who wait till the NBA playoffs to really tune in regularly. Well, even me, a diehard basketball fan, am I going to watch a Bucks basketball game without Giannis or a Lakers game without LeBron and Anthony Davis? No, I'm not tuning in for that. So I think the NBA got it wrong with starting the season so quickly.
Well, because they started it, like, right at Christmas, right?
Yeah, and part of the article that I read is that they pump in a lot of money to their Christmas Day advertising, so they didn't want to lose the Christmas Day schedule. I think was opening night, I think, was Christmas Day exactly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's
a couple days before, yeah.
And it's really the only game in town. I mean, I don't think – does the NFL play on Christmas? I don't think so.
They don't, but they did this year. The Saints and Vikings played one game this year.
Mm-hmm.
But normally they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the TV revenue. I mean, like, we can talk about, like, fans in the stands and what that does for teams, but really, you know, the big hitters are, you know, TNT saying, like, hey, we're our Thursday night games. You know, we need to get this product on the road, and there's billions of dollars tied up in that, let alone, you know, I'm sure that their popularity is taking a hit in China, but, you know, they love the NBA in China. That's where a lot of the league's revenue comes from. So it's unfortunate. I think that's why we see a lot of players resting and taking the days off. And I know that leads to, like, another point of contention about, you know, should they rest, should they not rest? It's just like it's a really it's a really, really tough place. There's no solution for any of it.
Yeah, I don't like guys resting under normal circumstances, but I can understand why a guy just having come off an NBA championship might want to rest. But
Right.
in a normal season, I think we have, I've talked about the advanced metrics, the advanced medicine and all that, guys playing to longer ages. I don't really think rest helps you that much. That's assuming that you've had an off season. That's when you really get your rest. And teams like the Lakers didn't have that, and they're getting hit hard by the injury bug right now to two of their superstars. But, we'll see. I'll be watching basketball, just not when we're missing the star players. But that'll do it for Salute Your Sports Week 24. I'm happy to learn about your favorite appetizers. We trailed off a little bit there, but we like to have fun. Tom and Ncaa, Drew Brackett, Tom Castleman will be back next week for more March Madness talk.